Okay, step 2 is starting with my clay. This is air dry clay, not ceramic clay. So if you're in ceramics, this is going to work a little bit different than what you've learned in ceramics class because, again, it is air dry clay. It does not need to be baked. It just needs to dry out, and then we're going to paint it with acrylics. You're going to need a piece about this big, fits in my hand about that big, and then a smaller piece for attachments. I'm going to roll my larger piece into a ball, and then I'm just going to squish it into a shape. We want it to stay pretty thick because air dry clay, if it goes thinner than 1/4 of an inch, it's really fragile and it'll break because, again, it's not fired, so it's not going to vitrify in the same way. Okay, you can pull it a little bit into the shape you want. Then you're going to take your eye and plop that right in the middle. Your extra bits of clay, we're going to create some eyelids first. So I'm going to take a piece and I'm going to roll snakes, or the technical term for in clay is coils. And I'm going to first get it a little bit wet with my sponge stick. To attach air dry clay, all we have to do is wet it. You don't want it dripping wet because too much water causes a problem, but that wetness will make it even more sticky and it'll stick together. So I got that stuck on. I'm even going to take my sponge on a stick. I'm going to make it just damp. So I'm going to squeeze out. Let me show you how I do that. I'm going to squeeze out the excess water, and I'm going to use my sponge stick to smooth in that coil so that I know it really attaches. Now, if you have a dripping wet sponge instead of damp, it will make your clay crack when it dries, which is kind of weird, but it's just a different type of thing than ceramics clay. It's very sticky clay. Okay, so whenever I want to smooth, I'm finding with the air dry clay, using these sponge sticks, dipped in water, but then squeezed out so it's damp, works really well. Okay, so now I have an eyelid. On this side, I'm not going to smooth it at all. On this side, I smoothed it into the background clay. I'm going to make one for the bottom. You can make as many as you want. You can see on this one, I did one big one on top and 2 little ones on the bottom. So it's up to you. You can roll it in between your hands, or you can roll it on the table. Okay, I'm just going to pinch off where I want it. And again, if you're in ceramics, usually you just use your finger to smooth it, but it just doesn't work that well with air dry clay. So dip my sponge in water, squeeze it out, and use that sponge on a stick to smooth it in. Just going to give it a little push so it overlaps the glass a little. And I'm going to smooth in this side. Again, it's up to you if you would like to add a second bottom eyelid or if one is enough for you. So I'm kind of dragging it down a little so I can smooth it in better. If it ends up going irregular a little bit, that's actually okay because this is a natural thing. So it will be a little bit irregular. I think I will add a second one. You know what I forgot? I forgot the most important thing, you guys. I did not wet it underneath where I put that coil. Let's hope it stays on. I think it will because I smoothed it in really good, but let's make sure I wet it this time. So I've got my coil, dip my sponge in my water, squeeze it out a little, add a little water there, and then I can have a double eyelid on the bottom. Okay, now what we need to do is add the fun bits. So now I am going to add in textures. I'd like you to have textures that are added on and textures that are stamped in. What the heck does that mean, Mrs. Caulfield? So added on means that I'm going to wet it. I'm going to create a little texture, so a little ball, and push it down. And if I add a whole bunch of these, I'm going to get a reptilian type of texture. If you're doing a bird, maybe you make little tiny leaves, a little bit harder, of course. Don't forget to wet the clay before you put these down, or they may fall off. The worst that'll happen is you'll have to glue them back on later, but best to get it wet first so that doesn't happen. So that's what I did on this one, all over the bottom. I added on texture. You can try out different things besides the balls. That's totally fine. Hopefully you did some research about your animal that you're doing and what kind of textures it has before you started. Okay. The other type of texture is pressed in texture. So like in areas on the eyelids, I took a tool, and it does, you can try out all different tools, and I just pushed in. Now this stuff is sticky, so you do have to be a little careful with it. So I'm just using the simplest tool, the end of a pencil, but we have a lot of various tools. If you use one of the ones for ceramics class, I'd wipe it off first, because they are using a different kind of clay than we are. But anything you can stamp in. So I love things like that. I love round things like marker caps are a fantastic tool. I can even use the bottom of a pencil to make little indents. Right? So here is impressed circles, and here's attached circles. So they have a much different look. So have fun trying out different textures. Whatever you can find on your table that I've added to use like a stamp. I like this on the eyelids though, because it kind of looks like eyelashes, which is kind of funny. There we go. And now I can add on anything else I want to on it. So on this one, I added spikes that kind of curl, because on Game of Thrones, that's what they have there. But you can add anything else you want on there. Hopefully you researched quite a bit. I'm going to get the area wet that I want to place them. And I found that, actually, I should start over here, that you need to start at the bottom of the pile. If I want this one on top, if I'm going to curve it towards the left, I need to start on this side. So I'm going to wet it every time I add one with a damp sponge. And I'm going to keep on adding them on top this way. There you go. You can add as much as you want. Add extra coils. Have fun with it. Last but not least, I'm going to take a damp sponge, and anything that needs to be smoothed out, I can smooth out. We're going to let these dry for a few days, and then we're going to paint them with acrylic paints, although they even look fantastic just the way they are. All right, see you soon.